In a massive hillside mansion overlooking the sparkling lights of Beverly Hills, Mr. Chen sat alone in his study, staring at the family photos on his desk. The successful tech entrepreneur had everything money could buy: luxury cars parked in his garage, priceless artwork hanging on his walls, and the latest gadgets filling his home. But none of it could fill the emptiness that echoed through the endless hallways of his 20,000 square foot home. Every evening followed the same lonely routine. He would return from his company's headquarters, loosen his tie, and wander through the quiet rooms that were meant to be filled with life and laughter. The chef would prepare elaborate meals that he ate alone at his massive dining table, designed to seat 20 people. Sometimes he found himself talking out loud just to hear a voice break through the silence. Growing up in the foster care system had left deep marks on his heart. He still remembered the day he lost his parents in that terrible accident. The police officers at the door, the confusion, the fear of what would happen next. For 3 years, he bounced between foster homes, carrying all his belongings in a small backpack, never knowing if the next place would become a real home. But fate had smiled upon him when a kind-hearted couple chose to adopt him at age 10. They weren't wealthy, but they gave him something far more valuable: love, stability, and the belief that he could achieve anything. His adoptive father worked as a high school science teacher, and his mother ran a small flower shop. They scraped together every penny they could to support his dreams, especially his passion for computers and technology. Now, at 45, Mr. Chen had built a technology empire worth billions. His company's innovations had changed the way people around the world connected with each other. Business magazines featured him on their covers, and young entrepreneurs looked up to him as their role model. Yet, as he sat in his study looking at old photographs, none of that success seemed to matter. The photo that caught his eye tonight was one from his college graduation. His adoptive parents stood on either side of him, their faces beaming with pride. They had passed away 5 years ago, within months of each other, leaving him truly alone again. He picked up the silver frame, his fingers tracing their smiling faces. "I wish you could see what your love helped me become," he whispered to their images. A notification on his phone interrupted his thoughts: another invitation to a charity gala. Usually, he sent his assistant to these events with a generous check. But this one was different. It was a fundraiser for a local orphanage. As he read the invitation, memories of his own time in the system flooded back. The uncertainty, the loneliness, the yearning for a place to call home. Walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows, Mr. Chen looked out at the city below. His massive house had 7 bedrooms, a home theater, a swimming pool, and even a small basketball court. All of it sitting empty, unused, waiting for a purpose. He thought about all the children out there who, like him years ago, were hoping for a family to call their own. That night, sleep didn't come easily. He tossed and turned, his mind filled with memories of his own journey from a scared orphan to a successful businessman. The words of his adoptive father echoed in his head: "Success isn't about how much money you make, son. It's about how many lives you touch." As the first rays of dawn broke through his window, Mr. Chen made a decision that would change not only his life, but the lives of many others. He reached for his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel all my meetings for today," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I need you to get me everything you can find about Hope Haven Orphanage. And contact my lawyer. I want to know everything about the adoption process." Little did he know that this decision would lead him down a path that would fill his empty mansion with more love, joy, and surprises than he could ever imagine. The charity event at Hope Haven Orphanage was unlike anything Mr. Chen had attended before. Instead of the usual glittering ballrooms and champagne flutes, he found himself in a modest building with walls covered in children's artwork. The moment he stepped through the doors, something felt different. The air was filled with the sound of children's laughter, mixing with the soft patter of little feet running down hallways. Mrs. Thompson, the orphanage director, greeted him with tired but kind eyes. She'd been running the place for 20 years, and every wrinkle on her face seemed to tell a story of both joy and heartache. As she led him through the building, she didn't sugarcoat the situation. "We're 3 months behind on our utility bills," she explained, her voice heavy with worry. "The building needs major repairs, and our food budget keeps shrinking." Walking through the dormitories, Mr. Chen's heart tightened in his chest. The beds were neatly made, with well-worn stuffed animals carefully placed on thin pillows. Each child had a small box under their bed, their only space for personal belongings. It was all too familiar. He remembered having a similar box, one that held everything he owned after losing his parents. In the playroom, children of all ages were engaged in various activities. A small boy, no more than 6, sat in the corner, carefully putting together a puzzle with missing pieces. 2 teenage girls were helping younger children with their homework. Near the window, a quiet little girl was drawing pictures, her dark hair falling over her face as she concentrated on her work. What struck him most was their resilience. Despite having so little, these children found ways to create joy. They shared their toys, helped each other, and faced their circumstances with remarkable strength. One little boy offered to share his only cookie with Mr. Chen, breaking it carefully in half with his small hands. The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to his eyes. Mrs. Thompson introduced him to some of the children. Each had a story that touched his heart. There was a pair of siblings whose parents had been lost in a house fire, a quiet teenager who had aged out of 3 foster homes, and a bright-eyed toddler who had been abandoned at the hospital. Yet despite their painful pasts, hope sparkled in their eyes. In the kitchen, he noticed a chart on the wall showing meal planning. The portions were carefully calculated to stretch their limited budget. The cook, a warm-hearted woman, explained how she tried to make the simple meals special by cutting sandwiches into fun shapes and arranging fruit to make smiley faces. "Sometimes it's the little things that make them feel loved," she said with a gentle smile. The facility's struggles were evident everywhere he looked. The roof leaked in several places, with buckets catching drips during rainy days. The heating system worked sporadically, forcing children to wear extra layers during cold nights. The computers in the small study room were outdated, making it difficult for the older children to complete their schoolwork. As the tour ended, they passed by a wall covered in photographs. Children who had found forever homes over the years. Mrs. Thompson's face lit up as she shared their success stories. "Each empty space on this wall represents a child who found their family," she explained. "But lately, these success stories have become rare. People are more hesitant to adopt, especially older children or siblings who need to stay together." Standing in the entrance hall preparing to leave, Mr. Chen watched a group of children playing together in the courtyard. Their laughter echoed off the walls, a sound that seemed to reach deep into his soul. He thought about his empty mansion, with its unused rooms and quiet hallways. Then he looked at these children, full of life and potential, needing only a chance to thrive. Before stepping out, he turned to Mrs. Thompson. His voice was quiet but firm as he spoke words that would change many lives forever. "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about the future of Hope Haven and every child here." The determination in his eyes told her this wasn't just another empty promise from a wealthy donor. This was something different, something that would bring hope back to Hope Haven. The next morning, Mr. Chen's office buzzed with nervous energy as his team of advisors gathered for an emergency meeting. His financial advisor paced back and forth, waving papers in the air. "This is unprecedented," he exclaimed, adjusting his glasses. "Adopting 30 children? It's not just about the money. Think about the logistics, the legal complications, the media attention." But Mr. Chen sat calmly at his desk, his mind already made up. The images from his visit to Hope Haven were still fresh in his mind: the leaking roof, the worn-out shoes, the hopeful faces. His legal team had worked through the night, researching everything about group adoption and child welfare laws. The papers scattered across his desk told a complex story of regulations and requirements. but none of it deterred him. "Sir," his public relations manager spoke up, her voice careful and measured. "The media is already getting wind of this. Several reporters have been calling. They're asking if it's true that you're planning to adopt an entire orphanage." She paused, checking her tablet. Social media is exploding with the rumors. People are divided. Some call it a publicity stunt. Others say it's impossible for one person to care for so many children. Mr. Chen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. He remembered the small box of belongings he once carried from foster home to foster home. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "Every child deserves a home. I have the means to provide that, and I'm not doing this for publicity." His house manager called next, speaking rapidly about the necessary modifications to the mansion. They would need to convert the home theater into a study room, transform the guest wing into proper bedrooms, hire qualified staff, teachers, counselors, caretakers. The list seemed endless, but each item made Mr. Chen smile. His empty house would finally have a purpose. The children's reaction to the news varied widely. Some jumped with joy, while others remained cautiously skeptical, having learned the hard way not to get their hopes up too quickly. The older ones had seen too many promises broken, too many potential families come and go. But when Mr. Chen spent the entire afternoon sitting on the floor with them, listening to their stories and sharing his own experiences in foster care, something began to change in their eyes. One small boy tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Do you really want all of us? Even the big kids?" His voice trembled slightly, hope mixing with fear of disappointment. Mr. Chen knelt down to meet his eyes. "Every single one of you," he answered firmly. "We're going to be a family. A big, wonderful, maybe slightly chaotic family." The paperwork seemed endless. Each child's case had to be reviewed individually. Social workers conducted countless interviews and home inspections. Mr. Chen's team worked around the clock, coordinating with child services, organizing medical checkups, and ensuring every legal requirement was met perfectly. Local news vans parked outside both the orphanage and his mansion. Headlines ranged from "Tech Billionaire's Heart of Gold" to "Questionable Mass Adoption Raises Concerns." But Mr. Chen refused all interview requests, focusing instead on preparing for his new family. He spent hours with child psychologists, learning how to help children cope with trauma and transition. He attended parenting classes, taking notes as diligently as he had in college. Mrs. Thompson watched all this with growing amazement. In her 20 years running Hope Haven, she'd never seen anything like it. "You're really doing this," she said one evening, helping him sort through children's files. "You're giving them not just a house, but a chance at a real family." Mr. Chen looked up from the papers, his eyes filled with determination. "When I was in their shoes," he replied softly, "one family took a chance on me. They changed my entire life. Now it's my turn to do the same for these children." He picked up another file, smiling at the photo attached. "Besides," he added, "my mansion has been waiting for this moment. It's ready to become a home." The mansion buzzed with activity as moving trucks pulled up to the front gates. Workers carried in colorful furniture, while decorators hung cheerful artwork on the once bare walls. Mr. Chen walked through each room, making sure everything was perfect. The cold, museum-like atmosphere of his home was disappearing, replaced by warmth and life. Each bedroom had been carefully planned with its new occupants in mind. The younger children would share rooms in pairs, while teenagers got their own space to maintain privacy. Every room had a desk for studying, comfortable beds with soft blankets, and plenty of storage for personal belongings. Mr. Chen remembered how precious personal space had been during his own time in foster care. The formal dining room underwent the biggest transformation. The antique table was replaced with several smaller, round tables to create a more intimate setting. The crystal chandelier remained, but now colorful paper lanterns hung alongside it, creating a playful mix of elegance and fun. The kitchen staff practiced preparing child-friendly meals while learning about various food allergies and preferences. In what used to be his private library, shelves were reorganized to include everything from picture books to young adult novels. Comfortable bean bags and reading nooks replaced the stiff leather chairs. A homework area was set up with new computers, ensuring every child would have the tools they needed to succeed in school. The team of professionals he hired was chosen not just for their qualifications, but for their hearts. The head counselor had grown up in foster care herself, understanding the unique challenges these children would face. The tutors were experienced in working with children from diverse backgrounds. Even the security team was trained in child safety and emotional support. On moving day, the children arrived in small groups to prevent overwhelming anyone. Mr. Chen stood at the front door, greeting each child personally. The little ones gazed wide-eyed at their new home, clutching their small bags of belongings. The teenagers tried to maintain cool expressions, but even they couldn't hide their amazement at the basketball court and swimming pool. One small girl stood frozen in the entrance hall, her worn shoes leaving marks on the polished floor. "Is this really our home now?" she whispered, afraid to move further. Mr. Chen knelt beside her, remembering his own disbelief when his adoptive parents first brought him home. "Yes," he said gently, "and those marks on the floor? That's exactly what homes should have, signs of life and happiness." The first dinner together was beautifully chaotic. Some children were too excited to eat, while others helped the younger ones with their food. The sound of 30 different conversations filled the room, mixing with laughter and the clinking of plates. Mr. Chen sat among them, watching as his dream of a full house came to life. That evening, as the children explored their new rooms, a teenage boy approached Mr. Chen in the hallway. "Why did you choose all of us?" he asked directly, his eyes searching for sincerity. "Most people want babies or young kids. Nobody wants teenagers or large groups." Mr. Chen thought carefully before answering. "Because every child deserves a chance at family," he said. "When I was your age, I thought I was too old for adoption too. But the family who chose me, they changed everything. They showed me that it's never too late for love to find you." As night fell, the mansion that had once echoed with emptiness was filled with new sounds. Quiet whispers, footsteps padding to the bathroom, the soft sound of bedtime stories being read. Mr. Chen walked the halls, making sure everyone was settling in. He paused at each room, listening to the gentle breathing of sleeping children or helping tuck in those still awake. In the last room, he found a group of siblings who had pushed their beds together, not ready to sleep apart just yet. Instead of separating them, he brought extra blankets and smiled at their relieved faces. "Sometimes," he told them, "family means making new rules." That night, as he finally headed to his own room, the mansion felt different. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was becoming a home. The first month in the mansion brought challenges that no business meeting could have prepared Mr. Chen for. At 3 a.m., he sat in the kitchen with a crying 60-year-old who had woken up from a nightmare about his old life. The little boy wouldn't let go of his hand, so they sat together sharing warm milk and cookies until the tears turned into tired yawns. During breakfast the next morning, 2 teenagers got into a heated argument over a missing phone charger. Before Mr. Chen could step in, a plate crashed to the floor, sending scrambled eggs everywhere. The younger children watched wide-eyed as their new father stayed calm, helped clean up the mess, and turned the situation into a lesson about handling anger and respecting property. The house staff quickly learned that their perfectly planned schedules rarely went as expected. Getting 30 children ready for school was like orchestrating a complex symphony where half the musicians had forgotten their instruments. Lost shoes, forgotten homework, and last-minute permission slips became part of the morning routine. One particularly difficult afternoon, a 12-year-old boy refused to come out of his room. The counselor explained that he was struggling with trust issues, afraid that this new life was temporary like all his previous homes. Mr. Chen canceled his important business meetings and spent hours sitting outside the boy's door, sharing stories about his own fears when he was adopted. Finally, the door creaked open, and they talked until dinner time. The swimming pool became both a source of joy and anxiety. While some children jumped in eagerly, others had never learned to swim and were terrified of the water. Mr. Chen arranged for swimming lessons, getting into the pool himself to show the scared ones that it was safe. His expensive suits were replaced by swim trunks and t-shirts, his briefcase often set aside for pool noodles and floating toys. Sleep became a luxury. Some nights, he would finally drift off at midnight, only to be woken by a small voice asking for a glass of water or another bedtime story. The dark circles under his eyes became a regular feature, but he didn't mind. Each interruption meant a child felt safe enough to ask for help. School meetings multiplied exponentially. Some children were struggling to catch up after years of interrupted education. Others were acting out in class, testing boundaries to see if Mr. Chen would give up on them like others had before. He attended every parent-teacher conference, worked with tutors, and stayed up late helping with homework. The dining room walls now displayed artwork and test papers instead of expensive paintings. A perfect math test from a student who had been failing held more value to him than any rare artwork. The mansion's pristine walls gained fingerprints, scuff marks, and the occasional crayon masterpiece, each imperfection telling the story of their growing family. One evening, he overheard two of the older girls talking about their new life. "Do you think he'll get tired of us?" one whispered. "It's a lot of work taking care of so many kids." The other girl replied, "I don't think so. Did you see his face when little brother drew in that picture? He looked happier than when he's on those business magazine covers." The most challenging moments came when the children's past traumas surfaced. A thunderstorm triggered panic attacks in several kids. A birthday celebration brought back painful memories for others. Mr. Chen learned to read the signs, to understand when a child needed space or a hug, when to talk, and when to just listen. Despite his wealth, he discovered that the most valuable thing he could give them was his time. His phone often went unanswered during family dinners. Board meetings were scheduled around school plays and sports events. His business associates had to get used to the sound of children laughing in the background during video calls. As he fell into bed each night, exhausted but fulfilled, Mr. Chen realized that the challenges were teaching him as much as he was teaching the children. Every difficult moment, every small victory, was weaving them together into something beautiful. A real family, bound not by blood, but by choice and love. As months passed, the mansion developed its own unique rhythm. The morning rush became a well-choreographed dance, with older children helping younger ones pack their lunches and find their shoes. Mr. Chen discovered that each child had special needs and interests, and he made time to nurture every single one. In the garden, he built raised vegetable beds after discovering that one of the teenagers had a passion for growing things. Soon, fresh tomatoes and herbs from their own backyard appeared in family meals. Other children joined in, proud to eat vegetables they had planted themselves. The cook turned their harvests into special dishes, teaching interested children about cooking along the way. The library became a favorite spot for afternoon homework sessions. Mr. Chen would often find himself surrounded by children of different ages, each working on their assignments. A high school student might be explaining math to a middle schooler, while he helped another with a history project. The sound of pages turning and pencils scratching mixed with quiet questions and patient answers. One little boy loved cars, so Mr. Chen taught him basic mechanics using his own collection of vehicles. They spent weekends learning about engines, with the child's eyes lighting up at each new discovery. Soon, other children joined their makeshift auto shop, turning it into a family activity where learning merged with bonding. The youngest girl had a gift for music, but had never had the chance to develop it. Mr. Chen arranged for piano lessons and the sound of practice sessions, from simple scales to increasingly complex pieces, became part of their daily soundtrack. Other children discovered their own talents: art, sports, computer programming. Each interest was encouraged and supported. Birthday celebrations became major events, with each child getting to choose their favorite meal and activity. But more touching were the small traditions that developed naturally. Sunday morning pancake competitions led to creative shapes and toppings. Friday movie nights found them all piled onto couches and floor cushions, sharing popcorn and commentary. The swimming pool area transformed into an evening gathering spot. Mr. Chen would often find himself teaching the little ones to float while teenagers practiced their dives. Some children preferred to sit at the edge, dangling their feet in the water while sharing stories about their day. These casual moments often led to the most meaningful conversations. The children's individual personalities began to shine through as they felt more secure. A quiet boy revealed a talent for telling jokes, becoming the family's official cheerleader on tough days. A formerly withdrawn teenager started organizing games for the younger ones, showing natural leadership skills. One rainy afternoon, Mr. Chen walked into the game room to find the children had built an enormous blanket fort. Instead of asking them to clean up the mess of pillows and sheets, he crawled inside. There, in the soft light filtering through blankets, children of all ages were reading stories, playing cards, and simply enjoying being together. He stayed for hours, listening to their dreams and sharing his own childhood memories. During parent-teacher conferences, teachers remarked on the positive changes they saw. Children who had struggled were improving academically. Those who had been withdrawn were making friends. When asked about the change, one child simply said, "It's easier to learn when you're not worried about where you'll be living next month." The staff noticed changes in Mr. Chen too. His rare smiles had become frequent laughs. His formal posture relaxed into warm hugs and playful roughhousing. Even his business style changed. He started developing more family-friendly technology and supporting education initiatives. The house itself reflected their growing bonds. Family photos filled the walls, not just posed portraits, but candid moments of everyday life. Art projects hung proudly in the hallways. The formal living room now housed a giant jigsaw puzzle that everyone added pieces to as they passed by. Every evening, Mr. Chen made time to visit each child before bed. These quiet moments allowed for private conversations, silly jokes, or simply comfortable silence. Sometimes a child would share a worry or celebrate a small victory. Other times, they just needed a reminder that they were home, truly home, and loved. As the one-year anniversary of their new family approached, whispers and secret meetings filled the mansion's corners. The children had been planning something special for months, carefully keeping their project hidden from Mr. Chen. Even the house staff was in on the surprise, helping to distract him whenever the children needed to work on their secret. The oldest teenager had taken charge of the project, coordinating with teachers and caregivers after school. Remember, she'd tell the younger ones during their secret meetings in the library, "This has to be perfect. He gave us everything. We want to show him what that means to us." Every child contributed in their own way. The little ones drew pictures and dictated stories to the older children who wrote them down. The teenagers gathered photographs from throughout the year, carefully organizing them into categories: first day home, school achievements, family adventures, and everyday moments. One afternoon, while Mr. Chen was stuck in business meetings, the children worked together in the art room. Paint-stained fingers carefully created colorful borders around photos, while others wrote heartfelt messages about their new life. The youngest boy insisted on adding glitter to every page he worked on, saying, "Because Dad makes everything sparkle now." The house staff noticed that Mr. Chen seemed curious about all the secret activities, but he never tried to discover what they were planning. Sometimes he'd walk into a room and conversations would suddenly stop, or he'd find artwork quickly hidden behind backs. He'd just smile and play along, pretending not to notice the excited giggling that followed him down the hallway. Their school teachers helped too, allowing the children to work on their special project during free periods. The art teacher stayed late several afternoons, helping them perfect their creative ideas. The school counselor contributed by helping the children express their feelings in words when they struggled to find the right ones. The project brought the siblings even closer together. Children who had once been shy around each other now worked side by side, sharing memories and stories. Remember when Dad tried to make pancakes that first weekend? One would say, leading to fits of laughter as they recalled the disaster that ended with flour everywhere and ordering pizza instead. Each child's contribution reflected their unique perspective on their new life. A teenage girl wrote about how Mr. Chen attended every one of her soccer games, even rescheduling important meetings to be there. A middle school boy described how his new father sat with him every night until he finished his math homework, never getting frustrated when he needed things explained multiple times. The little ones contributed artwork showing their favorite memories: swimming lessons with Dad, story time in the library, family movie nights with everyone piled onto the big couches. One drew their entire family holding hands, with hearts floating above their heads, writing in wobbly letters, "My forever family." As the anniversary drew closer, excitement filled the mansion. The children practiced their parts in presenting their gift, deciding who would speak first and how they would arrange themselves. They wanted everything to be perfect for the man who had given them not just a home, but a chance at a real family. The night before the anniversary, the oldest children stayed up late, putting the final touches on their surprise. They carefully wrapped the gift they had created, adding ribbons and bows. The youngest ones had insisted on using every color of the rainbow, saying it needed to be as special on the outside as it was on the inside. What made the project even more meaningful was how it had helped the children process their own journey. Through creating it, they shared stories of their first nervous days in the mansion, their fears of it not lasting, and how those fears had gradually been replaced by trust and love. In their own rooms that night, none of the children could sleep easily. They whispered to their roommates about tomorrow, wondering how their father would react to their surprise. Even the teenagers, who usually tried to act cool about everything, couldn't hide their excitement about sharing what they had created. The anniversary dinner began like any other family meal, but there was an electric excitement in the air. The children kept exchanging knowing looks across the tables, barely touching their favorite foods. Mr. Chen pretended not to notice their whispered conversations and poorly hidden giggles. After dessert, the oldest girl stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she held a large, colorfully wrapped package. "Dad," she said, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "we've been working on something for months. All of us together. Because we wanted to show you what this year has meant to us." The younger children could barely contain themselves as Mr. Chen carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside was a handmade book, its cover decorated with 30 sets of handprints in rainbow colors. Across the top, in careful letters, were the words, "Our Family Story." As he opened the first page, his breath caught. There were photos from their first day together. Nervous faces standing in the mansion's entrance, unsure smiles at their first family dinner. Beside each photo were handwritten notes from the children, describing their thoughts and feelings from that day. "I was scared it wouldn't last," one child had written. "But you kept showing up, every day, even when things were hard." Another note read, "You're the first person who came to my school play. I saw you in the audience, smiling, and I wasn't nervous anymore." Page after page told their story. There were report cards showing improving grades, photos of birthday celebrations, ticket stubs from family movies, and pressed flowers from their garden. Each memory came with stories written by the children, some in careful cursive, others in wobbly primary school letters. The teenagers section included longer letters. "Before, I thought I was too old to be adopted," one wrote. "But you showed me that family doesn't have age limits. Thank you for not giving up when I pushed you away." Another shared, "You taught me that it's okay to trust again, that some promises don't get broken." Halfway through the book, Mr. Chen turned a page and froze. There was a photo he'd never seen before. A young couple standing in front of a small house. The woman had the same gentle smile as one of his teenage boys. The man shared the same distinctive chin. Below the photo was a note in shaky handwriting. "These are my birth parents. My mom was your sister." The room fell silent. The teenage boy stepped forward, his eyes meeting Mr. Chen's. "I found the photo in my old files," he said quietly. "When the social workers were helping with the adoption paperwork, they discovered the connection. Your sister, my mom, she'd have been trying to find you before the accident. She never knew you had become successful. She just wanted her little brother back." Mr. Chen's hands trembled as he touched the photo. Memories flooded back, his sister, 7 years older, protecting him from schoolyard bullies, sharing her lunch when there wasn't enough food at home. They had been separated in the foster system after their parents' death. Despite years of searching, he had never found her. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he looked at his nephew, seeing his sister's features clearly now. The same determined set of the jaw, the same kind eyes. The boy who had reminded him so much of someone, but he couldn't place who, had been his sister's son all along. The other children gathered closer, forming a protective circle around their father and brother. The youngest ones climbed into his lap, wiping his tears with their small hands. The teenagers placed supportive hands on their brother's shoulders, understanding the weight of this moment. "We wanted to wait to tell you," the oldest girl explained gently. "We thought today would be special. Because now we know we're not just a family by choice. Some of us are family by blood too. But it doesn't change anything, Dad. We're all your children now, whether by birth, adoption, or destiny." Mr. Chen pulled his nephew into a tight hug, his tears falling freely now. In this boy, he had found not just a son, but a living connection to the sister he had lost. Around them, their family, this beautiful, unexpected family, drew closer, their love creating a shield around this precious moment of discovery. The day after the revelation, the mansion felt different, filled with a new kind of warmth. Mr. Chen sat in the garden watching his children play, his nephew beside him as they looked through old family photos he had kept stored away. Each picture brought back memories he thought he had lost forever, and his nephew eagerly absorbed every story about the mother he barely remembered. The other children gathered around them, asking questions about their grandmother and grandfather, wanting to know every detail about their family's history. Even the littlest ones sat quietly, understanding that something precious was being shared. This wasn't just their adopted father's story anymore, it was part of their family heritage too. Later that afternoon, Mr. Chen called a family meeting in the living room. 30 children settled into their usual spots, some on couches, others cross-legged on the floor, the smallest ones cuddled up against their older siblings. "Yesterday," he began, his voice soft but clear, "we discovered that family can surprise you in the most wonderful ways. But I want you all to understand something very important." He looked at each child, making sure they knew his words were meant for every single one of them. "Blood relations are a gift," he continued, "but they're not what makes a family real. What makes us a family is the love we choose to give each other every day. The way you help each other with homework, comfort each other after nightmares, and share your joy in the good times, that's what makes us real." The youngest girl raised her hand, her face serious. "Does this mean we're all aunts and uncles to each other now?" she asked, making everyone laugh. The tension broke, and soon the room was filled with chatter about their expanded family tree and how they were all connected now, not by blood, but by love and choice. That evening, Mr. Chen made a decision. He gathered his children again and shared his plans to start a foundation, one that would help other orphanages and support adoption programs. "Our story shouldn't be rare," he explained. "Every child deserves a chance at family, whether they come alone or with siblings, whether they're babies or teenagers." The children immediately wanted to help. The teenagers offered to speak at events about their experiences. The middle schoolers suggested organizing fundraisers. Even the littlest ones wanted to draw pictures for other children waiting for homes. Their enthusiasm showed how much they had grown, from scared individuals to confident family members wanting to help others. As night fell, they gathered for their usual evening routine, but everything felt deeper, more meaningful. The bedtime stories were about family. The goodnight hugs lasted longer. The quiet conversations in the hallways were filled with plans for the future, not just their own, but for all the children they hoped to help. In his study later that night, Mr. Chen looked at the family portrait they had taken last week. 30 children and one father, all with genuine smiles. Next to it now sat the photo of his sister, a reminder that love has its own way of bringing people together. He thought about how his empty mansion had transformed into a home bursting with life, laughter, and most importantly, love. The sound of footsteps made him turn. His nephew stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate, a habit he had picked up from his mother they had discovered. Behind him, several other children appeared, each carrying their blankets. Without a word, they settled around their father's desk, creating a cozy nest of family togetherness. As they sat there sharing stories and chocolate, Mr. Chen realized that his success in business meant nothing compared to this. The simple joy of being surrounded by his children, the pride of seeing them grow and heal, the endless possibilities of their shared future. His sister would have been proud to see her son surrounded by so much love, part of a family that grew bigger than anyone could have imagined. The mansion that had once echoed with loneliness now held the richest treasure of all. A family bound together by choice, strengthened by love, and committed to sharing their blessings with others. As the clock struck midnight and his children dozed around him, Mr. Chen smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of their extraordinary journey together.